This episode of the RPGStuck podcast contains spoilers for the Homestuck Epilogues. I beg of you, please read them first. I promise, you'll like them. Or not. We'll find out. And we are live. Welcome to the 8th episode of the RPGStuck podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Jerry, and these are the 3 unfortunate people I have dragged along with me today.
So, absolutely unfortunate. I'm Tangled Thespian, TT, L, Mish, whatever you want to go with. Hi, I've been on here a couple times now. This is starting to get awkward. Do I get a pin? Or...
Good question.
You might get some revenue at this point.
Yeah, maybe. I'm
Actually,
calculating
we specifically do not make money, and we pride ourselves on that fact.
Oh, true.
That just sounds like a consolation prize, really.
I'm calculated theatrics, or CT, General Classpects Dweeb.
My name is Spencer. I wrote a book. I made a trailer. I'm really cool.
You might know him.
I can vouch for that.
That was recently released.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spencer was the creator of our RPGStuck trailer/advertisement that is now very high on the Google results, and we are proud of him for that.
Ooh.
The Google.
Spicy.
Google. Wait, really? Oh, beans. That's
Yeah,
cool.
we're actually doing pretty great. We are going to talk about the epilogues today. The epilogues are a controversial work that is intended to continue Homestuck proper, or just be one possible continuation of Homestuck proper. They have delighted many fans, angered equally many fans, and my English teacher is now into Homestuck because I told him about the epilogues. Or, well, he's not into Homestuck, but, you know, he knows about the epilogues' existence, and he's going to listen to this podcast later. I am so sorry.
Really?
So,
oh, wow. Thanks for warning us.
Wait, yeah. Are we,
Thanks.
allowed to say swear words now? Or...
yeah,
Is that
you can say swear words. It's like artistic
Alright.
license.
Alright, that's
Of
cool.
course.
Fudge
Here, here.
balls.
Heck.
I didn't mean for... now I'm just entirely unsure if we're allowed to say swears or not. And you
So,
prefaced it
the
with
epilogues. So
Yeah.
I have a few
Oh my
just
gosh.
general questions to ask you guys about the epilogues, because like I'm trying to get different takes. You know, I wanna really expand our minds, expand the audience's minds too, and just like really put forward why we think the epilogues are either good, not good, somewhere in between. I saw like a survey on it, and it said that the people who most enjoy the epilogues were the people who went through the entire thing all the way without getting spoiled on major plot points. And that is very hard to do on the internet because we have
Yeah.
short attention spans and Twitter spoils everything. So if somebody, you know, obvious spoiler warning, I guess, but like if somebody, you know, sees like fan art of like evil Dirk or something on Twitter and they're like, oh my god, where is this from? And it's like, oh, this happens in the epilogue. And they're like, my favorite character is now evil. Oh no, I hate these epilogues. They suck.
You mean evil Dirk? You mean Dirk?
Yeah, it's just regular
Yeah.
Dirk, really.
I think that
He's just
actually
playing
that
a
is
role,
one of the
man.
that is one of the questions that we are
You ever
going
seen
to
Gone Girl?
ask first. So I guess we're just going with that first. So are Dirk's actions in the epilogue consistent to his character? We know that he's a bit of a control freak in Act 6, and he spends basically the entire time trying to get over it. And we know that Bro is not the best dad because 1, he's bro, and like literal bro, and 2, he's figurative bro, metaphorical bro, as in he is not he's not dad material. He's abusive, obviously. Like we had an entire conversation about this in A6, I5. So are Dirk's actions consistent with Dirk's character?
They're ridiculously consistent. This is something that's really confused me about how many people have railed against the epilogue, because this is a beautiful continuation of what he's had so far.
Right?
Yeah, this is like normal, run-of-the-mill what Dirk is at his worst. That's just what we all knew all along.
The meat epilogue is almost like I'd almost call it like a beautiful montage or send up to Dirk. It's like, by the way, this epilogue's basically about how Dirk's ascending to a new level of douchebag.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most loving way.
Yeah, no, like he is the villain. He explicitly calls himself the villain. He explicitly does villain things. That is his role, and he accepts that. Which is, I mean, it's not great. He could definitely have become a better person in a different timeline, but he didn't, and he never does. And that's what makes it interesting.
What makes it interesting even is that he refers to himself as the villain. He embraces this role, but at the same time, there is a reliability of the narrator issue that we see all throughout Meat and a decent portion of Candy, but I can get into my own personal arguments on that later. Meat is the main focus here. He is obviously influencing the narrative. However, he is still just a fallible human being, even if he is reaching ultimate status. He has his own biases, he has his own flaws, he has his own quirks. He has little things here and there that really just sort of lean towards saying, oh yeah, Dirk is a person. Dirk is a person who has his own thoughts, his own feelings, who has things that he can be wrong about, things that he can be right about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Names himself the villain, I think because it's as much a shield as anything else. It's him accepting, well, I can never be better. I guess I'm the villain. I guess when I fall, that just means I'm the villain. I still think he believes he's doing what is right.
I figured that him labeling himself as the villain was more like a self-awareness thing. Rose and Dirk talk a lot about what's canon and what isn't canon, and that suggests maybe they don't know they're in a webcomic, but they certainly know they have an audience of some kind. And I think that, yeah, I think that Dirk here isn't. I don't think he's like deciding to be. I think you're definitely right. He is like 100% playing the part of a villain, because he knows that that's the role that he has to take. That I think that is his own justification for his actions. I don't really understand the backlash towards Dirk's personality in the epilogues either, which is
I do sort of
that would have
understand
made
it,
for an
though.
interesting podcast.
Yeah.
We all
No,
agree.
it makes sense, though, is the thing. Like, people like Dirk. He's a fun character. He was one of my favorites for a good while, and he's still a really fun character to think about. And having him play the villain probably hurts, but, like, it's more interesting for him as a person to play that role. And it's more interesting for his Classpect and how he ascends as to this quote-unquote ultimate self thing to play this villain role, and how he accepts some parts of it and rejects others.
It is also, I think, very consistent with who he is as a person to just play the quote-unquote villain. Part of why I think he says this is it pretty much legitimizes what anyone does to him in the future, which does seem kind of consistent with how he sort of just allows others to have opinions and thoughts and sets up the inevitability of, yeah, Dave decides to slice my head off. That's perfectly fine. He should be allowed to do that. He shouldn't feel bad about that. It's that weird way that every version of Dirk, Bro, whatever, what have you, is very, very stupidly harsh, probably should not be apparent, but at the same time has good intentions.
It's a Prince thing.
I mean, technically Lord English is a version of Dirk, and Lord English is quite literally presented as the opposite of good intentions, but that's just being pedantic on my part.
It's being pedantic, but there's people in there.
How fucking dare you?
There's something in there.
Yeah.
There's people.
Yeah. Say what you will about Dirk, but he's playing the villain and he knows it and he's okay with it. And he
How do
wants
you-
us to be okay with that as well, on some level.
What do you guys think about his last lines to Jake in the Meat storyline?
That actually is, I mentioned earlier that it seems obvious at points that he is obviously human, that he still has flaws and he still has biases. His treatment of Jake, and full confession here, I absolutely hate and loathe Jake as a person. This is a consistent thing and has been a consistent thing since like he was first introduced, so take me with that grain of salt. But his
Go for
treatment
it.
of Jake is the most consistent human thing he does in the Meat epilogues. Almost one of the most consistent things. The way he treats him, the way he handles him, screams, I'm an angry, bitter ex. My heart is broken, and this is how I deal with it. That entire interaction at the end did not need to happen. It only happened only because Dirk wanted it to. And this is a guy who spends so much of his time going, okay, we need to cut out this, we need to cut this down, we need to avoid doing this.
At least we saw that the worst character is a Nazi.
On.
Oh, I have some choice words for Jane.
I can't believe it.
Feel free.
Surprise guest star, I guess.
Yeah, he got up just to interrupt this. Thank you, hun.
Valid.
Why don't you
What a
introduce
guy.
yourself? Why don't you introduce yourself?
No, he's
I
going
think
back to
I
that.
think he's gone.
Oh, okay. Okay, he's gone.
So
So,
it goes.
You can cut that out if you want to. What was I saying?
Something about somebody being a Nazi. I'll be honest, I kind of got distracted.
I
think
mean, I think we said what we all need to say about Dirk and as
Yeah.
a character. Yeah, this is Dirk. This is who Dirk generally is, both him and his role. It's just what happens when it goes bad.
yeah, true. Yeah, this makes sense. I think it's pretty consistent with Sorry?
or incredibly right at the same time that it is incredibly wrong, which is kind of how this dude operates. It's like, yes, he's incredibly Machiavellian. He comes up with all these really terrible plans that are rooted in what he believes to be good intentions and are purely logical ideals and things and pillars that he seems to understand.
Oh,
But no one else really agrees with him because they tend to have some emotional hang-ups about it.
I just fucking got that. Machiavellian. Because he's
Yeah,
a fucking
prince.
prince. God damn it.
That's like the archetype of the prince. I've been using
I
it for
did not.
years.
Look, man, I didn't piece that together. To me, Classpects were a literary device that, every once in a while were used to make a pun. They're like Hogwarts houses. I never assumed they mattered.
I use them for actual therapeutic purposes.
Oh
It's
my
really
god.
weird.
Wow, this is like
I've actually taught a AP level class in Classpect over the internet to many, many people.
AP Classpects. I just took like 6 APs. Wow.
Oh yeah, high school.
Yeah, no, I'm in it.
Heck yes. So this literally leads directly into my next question. Are Dirk's actions consistent to his Classpect, the Prince of Heart?
100%.
Oh my god.
Absolutely.
I've been so excited for this. This is literally the reason why I invited Calculated Theatrics onto this podcast, because they've been working on some crazy, new practical Classpect ideas, like how they're specifically used in practice. I don't know what they mean by that, but
okay,
I assume it's going to be great. So,
and you don't need a PhD in this either. I mean,
I might as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to grant Calculated Theatrics an honorary doctorate from the University of RPGStuck in Classpecting.
I did have a mock-up degree that I might post in the Bane plan sometime. Because it was very funny. No, so here's what I use Classpect for. Yes, it is explicitly a literary device to show a character's story arc and who they are and how they grow up. After all, Homestuck is a story about growing up, and the epilogue's about what happens after you do. But I also use it in real life for essentially the same thing. It's a personality archetype system. It helps people make sense of their own stories and how they've responded to those stories. And it helps people, become better people by using those traits and using those tips to figure out where their flaws are and how to improve them. So that is the practical Classpecting thing that I've been doing for 5 years now. And I've recently done a lot of work specifically in teaching other people how to use that. So when we say that Dirk is 100% being the unhealthy prince, yeah, no, it is. Because the thing is that a prince is the archetype of the Machiavellian prince. They're controlling, they're strategizing, but they are innately destructive. Now, the healthy prince which we see in some parts of Dirk's arc, especially in Act 6, later Act 6, when he starts trying to be a good person for a bit there, is that they have to prune their aspect. Like a gardener making a topiary sculpture, they take away what they don't like and they leave what does, instead of just wrecking everything and burning down your garden. However, yeah, no, it's a pain. Princes are a pain in the ass. It's just true. But the thing is, what Dirk does isn't quite go down that particular unhealthy road. What Dirk does is lean into the princely tendencies. Because, the normal story arc of a prince is about growing up and realizing, hey, you can't just wreck anything. But since the epilogues are about what happens after that, once you've realized what you do need to destroy, you start making choices about what you need to destroy. And you could be very, very wrong.
And there's if you don't mind my butting in, there's
Go for it.
The issue of if a prince needs to prune away what is most harmful about their personality, Dirk winds up stuck and eventually embracing an opposite problem.
Yeah, exactly. He prunes away almost his entire personality.
No, not even that. He prunes away the divisions between himself and the narrative. What he does is start unlocking his ultimate self. We see the one Dirk who's managed to rise above what he is, or what he's, the destructive cycle that so many versions of him have gone into. And then we see, just as he's starting to maybe come to terms with the fact that he could be a better person if he really puts his back into it and really cuts away bits of himself that he might not be all that comfortable taking away, he begins to sort of erode the barriers of his various selves. By the time we see him in the epilogues, he's now started to break down everything. He's starting to bring in and shovel basically all those other unfinished Dirks who are still roiling in that cycle, who are still basically, he could have bits of Bro in him, he could have so many different Dirks who have given up, who have accepted that they're the villain, who have accepted that they will always be awful and they can never be better. All those have been shoveled on top of him and are now drowning out whatever progress he's made. He's done the opposite of destroy bits of his personality. He's just destroyed the partitions that kept him in line.
Yeah, it's basically complete self-destructive, complete destruction of what makes this Dirk.
Which is cool, because at the same
It's
time,
really cool.
he's still a really interesting person who reaches a whole different kind of nirvana, but
He's totally
still also
self-destructive.
the asshole that
Yeah, maybe
can't
this kind of
change
Nirvana
feelings
isn't the
for
best kind.
example.
Yeah, it's a thing with ultimate selves that I do have a gripe with. Like, what we see of the ultimate self is that you very much destroy your chance for a healthy, normal human character growth, but you embrace the chance to become like this weird, powerful god because you're just that sort of person, and you are in every timeline.
Maybe. I'm kind of curious to see if we continue with more content from Homestuck, if we continue with the storyline. I'm really interested to see more from the various ultimate selves that we've got, especially Ultimate Dave.
I don't know. I think there's a very cool thing to be said about that, though, when it comes to how Homestuck like handles godhood in general and reaching new levels of power. Because like there's two other examples I want to use for that, and that's the god tiering process and whatever the hell like Caliborn did to become a lord. For the god tiering process, we see that in the final flashes. I forget exactly which one, but probably remember that the people who kill themselves on their quest bed to become gods, they die. Someone else takes their place. You aren't you anymore.
Yeah,
on a
that
very
was
basic
in,
level.
Yeah, that was in
But at the
Terezi,
same
remember?
time-
Yeah, exactly. And then the same thing with Caliborn happens. Once he becomes Lord English, he's still a destructive force of nature. Yeah, he still has some of his tendencies and like inclinations there, but a lot of like his artistic endeavors, a lot of his personality, like it or hate it, kind of gets erased in favor of just this destructive force.
Didn't he?
And I think the same thing happens with Ultimate Selves too. You just become this archetype of you.
Didn't Caliborn create his masterpiece after he was
Maybe
sort of
so,
bested
actually.
by the
No, he created
alpha
he
kids?
created the masterpiece by looking forward into the future before he faces
Oh,
Denizen
yeah.
to
Not even
after he faces
necessarily
Denizen.
that. He used those screens that he'd been watching throughout his thing.
Yeah,
Right,
that.
that makes sense. I always get confused with that whole
Rather
thing.
than showing us what he saw on the screen, because that would probably be more effort and work than he realized to learn how to just replay something on the screen, he pushed himself to make a claymation animation to show the best parts of what he wanted to about the thing.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. But
Okay.
yeah, so in a lot of ways, a lot of what makes Homestuck the story that it is that it shows in fairly clear terms becoming a god or ascending past the limits of like what makes you a normal human being really messes you up.
Oh fuck, we basically had at one point Jane going, well, I suppose I could let Karkat be president. I'm just gonna outlive him. I'm sure we can just let him have his fun. Jesus Christ, woman. I mean, you're right, but Jesus Christ, woman.
Oh, okay. We can talk about Jane. We can talk about Jane.
That's not even on the
she's-
list, but I will allow you to
She's
talk about it.
playing a game she never can win, I think is
See,
the consensus.
what I like about this is that it's also a perfect reflection of a very unhealthy made of life. The life, in my approach, is the aspect of desire. It is the aspect of needs, right? It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what you think you fundamentally need. But here's the catch. Every life player that we see in canon has a sense of this is what society needs, not realizing that it's actually what they explicitly need. And then they just put it on society and they try to make everyone conform. That is just part of what life players do. It helps hide the fact that they don't really have much of a personality, and they sort of go from there.
But I'm a little offended by that. Are you
It's
trying to
true.
tell me that liking fish and cuddlefish isn't a personality?
Are you
No,
trying
I
to tell
mean,
me
in,
that
like-
liking classical music isn't a personality?
It's true. But no,
Oh
it's
my
like,
god.
look at this. Feferi has a specific idea of how culling should be treated in Alternian society with this whole coddling thing. And we see that happen in Before Us, right? And how it doesn't actually practically work, and that most of the people on the ground don't really care. And vice versa for the Condes. We see a lot of Mina's quirks and what she believes is this is the way society should be. I think everyone needs this, obviously. It's not just my own projection on the world. And then we see what happens with that very clearly on Alternia. And finally, we get the chance to see that with Jane, and I'm really excited because it's stated explicitly that she's just a xenophobe. She's doing this because she's a xenophobe. And
She can't be a xenophobe.
she then
She's
puts
stating
that
it as
same
well.
view on everyone else, on society. She thinks this is what is needed for society, not realizing this is what I think I need.
I
That's
will
like
admit,
crazy. I literally never thought of it that way. The main thing I'm kind of
Yeah.
worried on that is how much is the whole Pikesies / Crocker influence, and how much of that is the actual life aspect, because I've always found that to just be the trickiest aspect to deal with, because literally all of the life characters have something to do with each other.
That's
Directly.
True. It's
kind
true.
of the problem that is unfortunately the weak point in this, in that every life player we see is in a very advantageous position in where they are to start with. I don't know if that maybe just can be tied to what life is as an aspect. Maybe you have to be somewhat advantageous in what you are and where you are as a person. I don't know that for certain. That doesn't seem like a very
Yeah, that seems weird.
thing to rely on,
I
but
don't
it is
know.
what we have to work with.
I don't know, it's this, a lot of what I'm saying here is definitely based on the canon examples, but also a lot of my practical work is based on just like class-specting a lot of people and noticing trends. So that is a trend with life players that for some reason I keep notice. Say what you will about it being a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it is something that's very common to life as well as being in an advantageous position, come to think of it.
The one thing you can say for all three of our life players that we experience is that they are not want for ambition.
Mhm.
Ambition is a lot of what they've got in hand. The question is the fact that they're in a position to exert whatever their ideas are on a large population an aspect of who they are as people and where they came from, or is that anything to do with the fact that they're all life players?
Could be both. Who knows? That's the real mystery.
Yeah, that's-
Arguably, you could say that any of the players that survived to the end to go to Earthsea would have a similarly advantageous position. Jane, however, from the very beginning of Act 6, from where we see her, she has kind of one goal in mind. Her one goal is, one day, I'm going to take up the Crocker Corporation, and then I'm going to fix it. I'm going to improve it. I am going to be a wonderful businesswoman, and I am going to rule this company with an iron fist. It's kind of funny that we lose a lot of things that were shown to us from the very beginning. Jane has changed. Okay, Jane expressed a lot more evil and certainly went some very, very xenophobic ways that could probably be beaten out of her. However, her friends don't really call her to task on that too often.
No.
Mhm.
yeah,
I mean,
like,
the Alpha kids were like a different kind of group of friends from the Beta kids.
A little bit.
A little more dysfunctional.
yeah,
a little
I've
bit.
A little
I definitely
hornier.
noticed that, because
True.
like the way John, Rose, Dave, and Jade end up, I don't know, I feel like they're certainly more stable in a way, because Roxy had her issues with Jane, just like basically stayed neutral for the entire time, while Jane slowly took over more and more of Earthsea's politics.
It
And
did.
Mhm.
Dirk
I-
either killed
no.
himself or ascended to omnisciency, and Jake is Jake is Jake.
Jake.
Jake
Christ.
kicks his ass and is just a constant distraction.
Ah,
Um, Again, bias showing through.
I can't believe that you're
It's
a
true.
Briscus stan.
No, but there is one good thing that came out of Jake, and that's at, like right in the middle of Candy. It showed us a theory I've been trying to push for a while about pages, and that is that they have to crash in order to grow.
That's certainly an arguable
Yeah, like we see it with Tavros as well. It's like they have to reach their lowest point. They have to realize that on a very fundamental level, what they thought about their aspect and their role with it is wrong. They just were wrong about that the whole time, so that they can become better people and grow from it.
That is hilarious. If this is absolutely circumstantial, but
It's
when I
very
think-
circumstantial, but it's
It's
more
true.
accurate than it seems. So
no, I mean my opinion that I'm about to give is circumstantial.
it was spicy.
Because when I think of pages, I think not really of Jake or Tavros at this point. I think of an RPGStuck character that I'm not even going to fully name because I don't want to show too heavy of a bias. But I think of one particular page in one particular session that's been going for a long time. And I think of the exact same cycle that he's gone through. And it's been a very similar thing. He has absolutely just crashed and burned over and over again, just running into what he is and what he thinks he should be. And it's hit a low point. He's hit many low points, frankly. It's been a history of low points. And over time and various instances of him, it's slowly been an improvement once he hits that bottom of I'm absolute trash and there's nothing to me, of him starting to pick up the pieces and go, wait, I can probably help.
Yeah,
I can probably do something.
that's what makes pages work. Like, they're very annoying. They are. I'll say what you like. I know you hate Jake. I'm not a fan of him either, especially early, but even in real life, it's part of an arc. Like, they need to fall and realize that they were wrong in order to grow from it.
Now,
I like to think of pages as like babies. They're very annoying to start out with, but you do have to help them along because they won't realize it on their own.
Now, to be fair, I don't hate pages. I just hate Jake.
Valid. Valid. He's very annoying.
I hated him from the moment he emptied bullets into that first Tinkerbell. I basically sat back and went, I'm not going to like you, am I?
He is treated pretty bad by the epilogues, but like,
Poor-
all in all, could be he ends up with a good place. He ends
Yeah.
up growing from it.
I'm a
And
little
what-
happy with how he ended in Candy.
What?
I feel like a lot of what happens with Jake is in a lot of ways self-inflicted. He very much doesn't want to be in any sort of responsibility, and yet he is lusted after by some of the most powerful denizens on the planets that he lives on. At any
When you
given
said
time.
denizens, I initially thought of like Homestuck denizens, and I was
No,
like,
no,
wow,
no.
just a
I'm
bunch of
using
snakes.
that
Oh,
as a
that
word to
wasn't-
refer
Maybe
to
that too.
like the alpha kids and fucking Arania and yeah, all that shit. So I kind of I'm willing to like him. I feel a lot of sympathy for him because I feel like the dude is just trying his best to avoid all of the squabbling that all of the other rulers of the New World have found themselves entrenched in. And he is just doing a pretty suboptimal job at it because of his own obligations in a lot of ways. Not to say that I'm a fan of him, but like I kind of get it. I feel for the dude.
I get.
Plus, it does confirm that hope is the aspect of being horny. So, like,
You know what? This makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense.
don't it just?
Sorry, I'm looking down to like the one character that I've personally had to Classpect and run myself, and guess what he is?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's true.
One of the most recent things that happened with him, well off, and this one's an ancestor stuck thing. One of the most recent things he did was literally he's been in an on again, off again sort of relationship with my own character in that session. And one of the most
Oh.
recent things he did was literally in the middle of a battle, because he's a charisma protagonist player of that sort, was break, look to my character and go, look, I know you've been having some very difficult feelings about me and stuff like that. So I just want you to know this isn't personal. Like, smooches her to restore luck points and then backs off and goes, I'm sorry. I just need you to know that, you know, many things hope is based on. One of them is being absolute unadulterated lust. And then continues shooting. And I'm like, you bitch.
It's true. It's unfortunately true.
That is excellent. That is just excellent. Man, session talk is crazy, but oh, you don't actually post that much in session talk. Huh. Well,
Nah. No, I just brag everywhere else I can.
yeah, you just have a podcast.
I just sort of spill that everywhere. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's what D&D stories are good. All for really.
I mean, this
Hey,
is
check out
the
this crazy alternate life I lived.
this is the RPGStuck podcast after all.
Mm.
Very
So
true.
Where
yeah,
else are we gonna talk?
Yeah, I don't want to make it about sessions that I know of. We're supposed to be talking about the epilogue. Someone give me an epilogue question.
all right. I'm going to give an epilogue question, just not to you. How well is Roxy's trans narrative represented? Because
Yeah.
they're like two separate timelines. We're going to refer to Ultimate Roxy as they, Meet Roxy as he, and Candy Roxy as she from this point onward. So how well
Okay.
is their
Alright.
trans narrative represented?
All right. Well,
Okay.
as a straight white dude, I feel
Come
very
on.
I feel very qualified to talk about this. So allow me to begin. No.
God. Look, as the one and only non-cis person here, I actually do have some sort of credibility that I can pretend to have.
See, this is why I invited them.
It's true. No, so here's the fun thing. I think they handled Roxy amazingly in all of the timelines.
All right.
And here's why. Because, like, the fun thing about, I mean, yeah, exploring your gender and realizing, hey, maybe I'm not cis is not strictly a choice. You just sort of realize it and you're like, well, here we are now. And both timelines do that. But the circumstances around both of them change how they do that in a lot of ways. And, like, shape who Roxy is in very, very different ways. Like, in Meat, he's got this whole new character. He's got this whole, how do I explain this? He very much confronts this full force along with Calliope and becomes who he wants to be on a very basic level. Like, is Meat a harsher timeline? Debatably, yes, but at the same time, it's a timeline where you confront those sorts of things about yourself. Does Dirk not understand it? Yes. Can Dirk do anything about it? No. And it's great.
Dirk just completely gets blanked on this one and keeps getting confused about this because it's Roxy is the one person he can't properly read or seems
Exactly
confusing to read, which is probably part of, I guess, in that timeline, his void aspect. But I do like
void players.
I thought that Dirk misgendered Meet Roxy because Dirk had this complex that if he is above all other people due to his omnipotence, and pronouns are something that another person requests, and the other person is barely a person in his mind because the other person is not omnipotent like him, then he doesn't have to respect his or their pronouns because just like in general, because it was put upon him by something else that isn't him.
Oh man, no, he's just doing it to be a Dirk to alt Calliope.
It's possible, yeah. Dirk is, in fact, terrible, so...
He's not omnipotent is the problem, and he proves it when he basically gets confused about the fact that, oh, I need to refer to Roxy by a different front. I wasn't expecting that. That's all right.
That doesn't make sense. That doesn't factor into my plans.
I don't know how to deal with this on the fly. It's kind of hilarious to watch from him.
I personally read that part of the epilogues as him. I don't really know like I don't really know the term for it, but like off the top of my head, when somebody not versed in these issues says, "Oh yeah, that's fine with me," but really it's like not fine. They just want the other person to get away from them as far as possible. Like like oh, I believe in freedom for everybody, but if I see a gay person like within 5 feet of me, I'm going to run away or something. Like just like somebody who is very clearly not versed in these issues and is very clearly not okay with it, but is trying to convince something or somebody else that they are.
Yeah,
that's why Dirk's whole thing just feels like that Detective Pony fanfic. It really does.
However, I see Dirk, and when he purposefully misgenders, I think he's mostly doing it because he knows the only audience that could possibly hear him doing it is someone he wants to piss off anyway.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Never do that to Roxy's face because he does care about her. Him. Or they.
Depending on the timeline.
God,
and then in the Candy timeline, it also gets real. Because, like, the thing is, it's explicitly stated that she does explore gender in a very similar way, but based on the circumstances she found herself in, decided not to.
I do like, if you don't mind me going back a little bit, one of the things he said was that Meat was about confrontation. And Candy, in my something I noticed when I was reading through both, and I started with Candy for reference. I started with Candy, and one of the things I kept saying to myself is, what is going on here? Someone is controlling something about these characters. Because one of the consistent things, no matter how crazy things got, and it did get very crazy, was how well everyone seemed to sort of just bounce with it. How often we came back to the fact that someone basically started pushing against the grain of what reality was and saying, maybe I shouldn't be okay with this. Maybe I shouldn't like this. The response was always a very heavy-handed, no, we're happy here. This is our happily ever after. We can accept this. We can go with this. This is okay. Don't challenge it.
Well, that's why they call it the candy.
It is called the candy. And meat, the opposite is true. Everything is, we need to challenge this. We need to confront this. We need to deal with this. And we need to deal with it now. Candy, everything is drawn out. Everything is suppressed. It is carefully cultivated.
They're trying to create a traditional life. They're trying to have their coffee shop AU.
It's a little more than that. I think if we look at is overseeing each timeline, it makes sense that way. I know it's the main difference in Meat and Epilogue and how they're presented is Meat is presented with clear, obvious influence on the narrative. There is the obvious, it is told in a second person style. We get to see a lot of prompts that are directly handed to our players, whoever's being focused on. Candy, we lack that in most of it. However, there is passive narrative style, especially in those moments where you kind of feel the characters being graded against their will of, maybe I shouldn't just be okay with no, I'm going to be happy forever here. It feels a little bit like someone's quietly putting pressure on in the background. And the someone that I'm obviously leaning at here is that Alt Calliope is sitting in the background going, no, I need to keep this timeline under control. Passively, very much in the background. And she shows her hand at the end of Candy, which is the point where I sit back and go, oh shit, she's been doing this the whole time. She's been quietly making sure things just stay smooth, stay calm. No one's trying to leave the timeline. That would cause a lot of problems as the person who is overseeing this thing and keeping it safe in its little bubble.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There was one thing I was going to talk. That's a question I was going to ask. So, CT specifically, you said that there are different circumstances where Roxy either opened up as a trans male in the Meat timeline, or I guess I don't really know the word for it, but pretended to be a cis female in the Candy timeline, or just decided.
More like just went back into the closet and decided it wasn't worth it, which is interesting, because that is something that happens.
Yeah, that's what I was going to specifically ask, because V on their Twitter, I don't know V's pronouns. I'm just going to go with there. So
it's just V.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't think letters have pronouns. So V on their Twitter said that the trans narrative presented where, oh, I knew it since I was like, oh, disclaimer for the audience, I'm cis, I don't know these things. So V on their Twitter said that the trans narrative of I knew it since I was like 1.5 is a construct created to smooth over a lot of the faults in, I don't want to say like faults, but just like a lot of the messiness that surrounds like legitimate advocation, because if complicated narratives don't fit with simple minds. So
no, that's true.
Yeah,
I honestly, given Hussey's track record, I'm not sure if he was the one writing the full trans narrative, but whoever did got it really accurate, because the thing is, it is really messy to figure this stuff out. You don't know from age one. That's not how it is. You just sort of realize it over time, and eventually you're like, wait, am I this? Am I this? What's going on here? What's happening?
Hell yeah.
And the way that Roxy handles that in both timelines differs because of the people that they're around and the circumstances that they're in, and that's pretty accurate too.
I find that a really great reflection of Roxy is as a person too, that environment means so much to him, her, them. God damn it, Roxy, why must you be so complicated?
Ultimate Roxy is them.
Ultimate Roxy is them.
Yeah, just for this podcast, Ultimate Roxy is them, so their environment.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it. It's well done.
I like it.
Honestly, probably my second favorite part of the epilogues as a whole was just like how they handled Roxy. My first favorite is Obama.
Oh yeah, Obama's a
That was
freaking legend.
great.
That was
Fucking, I lost my shit at that. I
I
was
remember
No, right?
this is
texting my
why
friends. I'm like, guys, this is an important character moment. It's
this
so
is why I
stupid.
hate spoilers for the Homestuck epilogue so much. Like any other piece of like usually by the time I consume a piece of media, I'm already spoiled on it. I already know at least some of the stuff
Mhm.
that's going to happen in the end. I recently read a
Yeah.
5-book Harry Potter sequel series written by a fan that was like just not obscure enough to like be within my sight range on the internet, but just obscure enough in order to not actually be spoiled to me. So reading that was very
Congratulations.
fun, but honestly, I feel like if I knew what happened at the end, well, I don't think I'd really read it in the first place, but like it was still an enjoyable read. I'd recommend it. Look up James Potter. It's free. And back on topic, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So the thing about the Homestuck epilogues is that stuff like that Obama appearance, like I remember that was the one part that I actually was spoiled on, and at first I was like, "Oh, is this a joke?" And then it turns out that it actually happened, but I didn't really know what like happened there. I didn't really know what Obama did, but if I heard all that, I would either one assume it was a joke or two assume that the epilogues themselves were a joke and just not read them, and I would be missing out on so much, and I wouldn't
What
have,
is it, 190,000 words?
yeah, quote unquote, the right to talk about it on the internet. So that's why I'm so obsessed with like not spoiling the epilogue for people, because the
Because
epilogues are this
Obama!
like work, like this masterpiece that stands semi separately from Homestuck, but like should definitely be experienced afterwards individually, or like live blogging or something, or just it definitely is an experience of its own and shouldn't be missed out on or watered down. It's like it's great.
Out of
Well, then-
curiosity, something
Mhm.
we probably should have asked way earlier than now. What did everyone read first? Like I mentioned that I read Candy first and then I went to Meat. I think that actually has an impact on what you got to read first because I read Candy first. So when I got to Obama, I was so far down the everything is game, everything is real, everything is weird, just roll with it and accept it thing that by the time Obama came, he was completely out of nowhere because I hadn't read Meat yet. I had none of that other than occasional vague shit posting from Dave in the comic itself about Obama.
Yeah.
So when Obama just appeared, I'm sitting here going, what the fuck is that? Okay, I accept this is hilarious. Is Dave tripping? I don't know what's going on. Oh god, he's just descended. What the fuck? So what did everyone else read?
I personally read Candy. I don't do this, kids. So I initially read like Candy 1, Meat 1, Candy 2, Meat 2, but then I got to like chapter 5 of each, and I was like, this is legitimately fatiguing. So I decided to just. And also, V from Homestuck actually posted a tweet where they said, read one section first and then read another section in their entirety, no going back and forth. So what I did was after that I decided to read Candy all the way through on V's recommendation and then Meat all the way through. And my thoughts on it are I think that's actually the best way to do it. It's just my opinion, and from the epilogue survey statistic thing that somebody put out, I think it's Vrisrezi on Twitter, but I'm not sure, they might have changed their tag. So it doesn't really matter apparently, just as long as you're not like going Candy 1, Meat 1, because apparently that actually adversely affects your epilogue enjoyment. So
Yeah,
just
I'd assume that. I started with Meat, actually. And
Yeah, I started with Meat
that's
too.
what made Obama really, really good, because it is
Right?
actually a weirdly cathartic moment. Especially having gone through Meat, having slogged through that painful, like, disaster, and then
was-
immediately slogged through another painful disaster where you're like, no, 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 no,
And then the
come
one
on, what, no! And then Obama
It was
shows
an
up and you're like,
amazing
yes,
payoff.
yes.
Like you don't even realize that it's foreshadowed until you get there and you're like, holy shit.
that
It
is
does, it improves the
Like,
Obama
it-
experience.
it's so
It's
unexpected,
Obama
but it's
experience.
gorgeous because it's like you understand.
Yeah, it's
Get it.
great, honestly. I honestly really recommend that. I see the thing that I did was just like sit down in front of the computer, read all of Meat, immediately read all of Candy, and then go on to anywhere else. Just like a nervous wreck.
Yeah, this this is one of the things I absolutely love about how the epilogue was written. Everyone seems to really defend the way they read it first, whether you went meat or you went candy, because both ways were equally valid and had certain setups and payoffs. Certain things were going to be complete fucking surprises to you, but other things were going to be neatly set up. Obama was a complete surprise to me, which felt surreal, but it was also, it wasn't unenjoyable by any means. It was completely surreal, but it was also really fun once I'd kind of settled in and gone, okay, we're doing. However, on the offside, I got to completely understand, one, the idea that Dirk offed himself immediately, and that this was going to be, it set off immediately alarm bells in my head of, okay, what does Dirk know that we don't? He knows something, he's aware of something, or he's being a melodramatic bitch about this, but he seems to be aware of something. At the time, my guess was that he was aware of whatever this force was that was kind of pressing down on the heads of everyone and making them just kind of go along with everything. That was my guess, is that, and why he was so urgently in a hurry to kill himself as fast as possible. Like he was afraid that was slowly going to mellow down into his brain and chill him out too much, and he was just going to join the sugar rush.
Yeah.
Not exactly true, but I think it was valid enough at the time.
Yeah.
And I had the entire build-up. I had the warning. I basically went into meat with a clear warning from Alt Calliope, which was the narrative can be affected. So by the time I was looking at meat, the very first sentences and the fact that these prompts start appearing immediately sets off alarm bells in your head. It seems like a very great payoff. Like, oh shit, she was warning us. She was letting us know ahead of time so we don't get tricked.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, guys, that might have seemed like more surprise when all of a sudden Dirk came out of the background and went, by the way, I control the narrative.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that was a fun moment.
yeah, the
I
main
kind of like the surprise, but hey, both ways work.
And I like the surprise of Obama and the little things that were just peppered into candy that just came out of nowhere for me. That's my point though. It's valid either way because you're given pieces and they together. So
yeah,
I mean-
so one of the main payoffs and setups that was different for me specifically because I read Candy first was Dirk's suicide. I didn't really like pick up on the context clues. I thought he was just being melodramatic, but I thought he was being melodramatic at first, and like since that's what I thought, I was actually like, holy crap, this is not going to be all fun and games, is it? So that actually, I was like, oh wow, he's dead now. Like I kind of felt it, and only until later I realized, oh, he's not completely dead. He's still alive in a different timeline, and probably doing up to no good or whatever. So I actually for like 20 pages or something, I actually believed, oh well, wow, he's dead. That was like a graphic depiction of suicide.
they also devoted an entire chapter plus more of everyone dealing with this suicide, so I can understand you getting there.
Yeah, that entire chapter with that and the semi-nonsensical funeral, that was, I believed that. That was all, that all happened. And within the story, that all happened. And meanwhile, in a different timeline, it went obviously completely differently. And, if you read Meat first and then you read Candy, you obviously wouldn't get that because you would be like, oh, he's just killing himself in this timeline to, gain more time
consolidate
in the
his
next.
power in the other.
Yeah. It's
So-
all messy.
That's fair. I hadn't considered that aspect of it. I still do think that Meat is the right one to read first, though.
Depends on what you're looking for.
I will
Exactly.
fiercely defend Candy just because I said so and V said so, but judging
Alright.
from that survey that I keep mentioning, it literally does not matter.
No,
People
I'm sure it
enjoy
doesn't.
the
it
epilogue.
doesn't, but that's
equally.
not going to stop me from cracking my knuckles menacingly. All right.
Yeah. Look, when I go into a story like this, I fully expect to just like throw myself into a very painful tale, and that is exactly what Meat gave me.
Yeah.
That's why I started with Candy, honestly. I knew I expected too much. I expect too much of Hussey at this point, or maybe I did.
I figured one of them would be
I
fluffy.
see two options. I have an idea of where Meat's gonna go because almost everyone and their mothers put together the ideas of the basic setup for Meat and how John was going to run around, Meat, the fact that it could lead to John's inevitable demise, very literally. So I'm sitting here looking at Meat and looking at Candy, knowing what more or less is probably going to happen in Meat. And then I sat there and went, which means Candy's going to be worse somehow. So I went for Candy first.
All right.
Nice.
Well, fair enough, yeah.
I would have. That's
Honestly,
an
the reason
interesting
why
thought process.
the reason why I went for Candy first was entirely because V said read Candy first and read one section and then the other. Literally before that, the only thing I wanted to see out of the epilogues, because I'm not a good reader, apparently, the main thing that I wanted to see out of it was just John and friends beating the crap out of Lord English, and I didn't even care it was text at this point. I just wanted to see it happen. Like, I just wanted to see that catharsis. I don't know why, it was just I wanted to see it happen.
It is basically the ending that we're promised.
Yeah, it was basically the ending that we were promised, and so many people online were basically like screaming about it, talking about, oh man, I want to see Caliborn's masterpiece as like a flash, and I hope that's part of the epilogue. And that's literally the only thing I expected out of it. And in that process, from 413 to 420, that's what I was expecting, and on the release date, 420, I got something completely different, and I am very glad that I got that something completely different, because this is so much better than John and friends beating the crap out of Lord English and that's it, and then they all live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like V said, this is a story for like the 20-somethings. This is very much how they confront. Well, we did it. We grew up. Now what?
The answer for some of them is take over the world. The answer for others is stay in and shitpost on the internet. And the answer for others is fuck this gay shit, fuck this gay earth and everything about it and your idyllic little fantasies and happy ever afters. I'm going to get on a ship and leave.
Yeah. Part of fun.
Well, I mean, it's their idea of fun. They get to go on the ship.
It's not fun. There's no fun involved.
Yeah, no, there's no fun involved.
There's fulfillment involved.
If you're wondering how they eat or breathe or other science facts.
You can't reference that because I know that you've never seen an episode of MST3K.
I actually have. I watched
Oh, you saw one? Okay. So
I saw like the first half of like a Netflix thing. Just think to yourself, it's just a podcast. I should really just relax.
Here's the thing. No, for starters, you can't just go on. You can't just go on TV tropes and look up every joke from MST3K and think that you're part of this, Jerry.
I can't believe that you're just gatekeeping me on my own podcast.
Yeah, I freaking might. All right.
Oh my god!
I feel like
you are
I've earned
literally
that, right?
a raccoon.
Oh my god.
Were there any other basic topics we wanted to cover?
Yeah, what else?
There was one last one. I was thinking of just saving it for the next episode, but like this is literally the perfect transition into it. Are the epilogues a metaphor for the internet and the community that they created?
I mean, yes and no.
Maybe. Not
Because
hugely, if so.
I've heard arguments for it because, I saw it on the recent Vice article, and even before that, like the epilogues are basically an analogy to how political divisions on the internet and just the increasing hostility of literally everywhere and just like increasing polarity and stuff, just like how people like find out stuff about other people, like through the internet, how people find stuff out about like their longtime friend that they really didn't need to know, and then they break off contact with them. And that's kind of reflected in here, where after everything's over and after the trials and tribulations of teenagehood are over, people drift apart.
Maybe. I think it's slightly more complicated than that, though. I think that, yeah, there is a political element there. Obviously, Obama's in it, but, like, besides that, it's more just that, like, the epilogues are a story about, what you do after you grow up, after your teenagehood, what you find out about people. Part of that's political, part of that's personal. So, in a lot of ways, while it does play a role, I don't think it's a metaphor for the internet or connectivity or any of that. It's just a metaphor for adulthood in the modern era, and the internet plays a massive role in adulthood in the modern era, so.
I think if it is a metaphor, then it's a frosty fucking take, because there is so much more commentary to be made about the internet and modern communication now. Like, have any of you guys noticed that it's getting kind of civil recently? Like internet discourse, not even like outside of politics and all that ridiculous shit.
Honestly,
like there are things like there are wholesome memes now. We didn't have those like 5 years ago, 10 years ago when Homestuck started.
I remember in like 2008 or whatever, or just later, I was young, and generally on the internet, I noticed that everywhere was just kind of like hostile. Like they had like this weird in-group, out-group vibe. And, it was mainly like white, straight males in their 20 somethings, or like teenagers or whatever. And like they still had this weird in-group, out-group vibe because that was kind of what they're used to, and maybe they weren't happy in real life, and that's kind of what they created on the internet, like this kind of like the gamer trend, like
Yeah.
back that like the gamer identity crisis or whatever back in like just whatever. I don't know. I'm all
No,
over the place now. Like that's
it is kind of bizarre how like far we've come recently.
yeah,
I
like
think
everything's generally just like, even if politics are getting,
yeah,
even more messed up than you just
obscenely
yeah.
contentious and polarized.
Yeah, but like everything else, like all the like most of the quote unquote negative energy, I feel like is just kind of directed toward there. But like, meanwhile, basically everywhere else, like, is just kind of chill.
Yeah, remember when freaking Avengers came out and actually nobody spoiled it for
Yeah, nobody
anybody?
spoiled Endgame. The first time I got Endgame spoilers was from somebody in real life. The internet
Yeah.
was more civil to me than people in real life. It was some guy in the locker room. He shouted out a major Endgame spoiler. I won't say it because we're not spoiling Endgame on this podcast. But,
Oh,
like,
no. In fact, I was amused. I went to see Endgame as soon as possible because I was anticipating just nonstop spoilers. Saw
Right.
it, waited a couple days, then went into our spoiler chat on this server and basically said, "Hey, I'm surprised no one's talking about this." And everyone was basically like, "Shh, shh, shh." We don't
Not
talk
everybody's
about
seen it
this."
yet.
I'm sitting here going, I appreciate that you're all doing this, but we are in spoiler chat, but fuck it. You know what? You're being good. I'm going to let this go. I'm not
It's-
I
gonna-
mean, at that time, I think spoilers, the spoiler chat might have been for also, that was what, like it was 2 seconds after the epilogues happened. So that might have been what people wanted to talk spoilers about. Not
No,
necessarily.
I moved
we had
the
the
Homestuck spoilers into a separate
Oh, I
channel
see.
because I actually
Mhm.
like I
You
knew that
did
the
want to
Homestuck
talk about
epilogues were
Endgame
going to be a
stuff.
big thing, and I wanted to encourage Homestuck discussion on our server. So
Alright.
I actually moved the Homestuck stuff into its separate channel, which I then highlighted, or kind of just like drew attention to. And people were actually pretty good about like keeping the Homestuck spoilers, initially just in the Homestuck channel. And
That
now,
too.
it's basically fair
Element of
game because we had
appreciation for everyone on the server who kept
Alright.
along with that, and I don't think we had to really swing the banhammer or be overly cruel to anyone in regards to keeping the epilogues really under wraps and contained to the discussion channel. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. I mean that honestly. That's not sarcasm.
Yeah, you guys
yeah,
are doing good.
like honestly,
Mhm.
you guys are great. Like shout out to our community. Like you guys did good, and people are still not spoiling Endgame, which I also appreciate. I mean, like by now, I don't really know what like the spoiler, time
I
limit
mean, sort of-
is.
In my opinion, it stops when the movie stops airing. But
Yeah, that's what I had in mind. But like, I still didn't watch Adventures Endgame yet. I'm still waiting until I can get it from totally legal sites.
I
Mhm.
see.
Of course.
Yeah.
if you don't mind me redirecting, the whole is the epilogue a metaphor for the internet and the community thing. Y'all started going on about how the internet and the community is, and I'm sitting here going, was it a taking a new tact? Because I've seen some of the very drastic responses to the epilogue, and a lot of people writing it off as not really Homestuck or something. Like
Yeah,
that. And
like
I'm
I've seen a
people
ton of
are seen some arguments that it was written as a reaction to everyone demanding an ending, and I'm sitting here going, but why go through all this effort? This is an entire book that reads like Homestuck, albeit more mature and far more almost bitter tone, yes, because the author himself has kind of gotten a little more jaded over the last 10 years. Surprise. But it does read like a really great reflection of the community, if unintentionally. I don't think it was made as a gotcha in any sense. However, I think of it in terms of the finale we got. It works as an ending. It works.
Yeah.
As an ending. You get the pieces are not nicely tied up. I don't think it was meant to be, really, because we were able to guess as a community a lot of what was going on in the Meat epilogue. We were able to put together a lot of the pieces ourselves, but people weren't happy with that. They wanted to see the answers and they wanted them to be spoon-fed to them. So what we got, however, was the continuation of the story. However, because it is never neat, it is never pretty. Life in Homestuck is not presented as a neat little story where everything is going to be handed to you and everything is going to wrap up neatly. It is never done that way. It is always messy. There are always pieces you're going to have to assume and read into and start to sort of put the pieces together. You're expected to think as you're reading. And in that sense, the epilogue, one, everyone screams, "Oh my God, there must be one coming," because we leave with everyone leaving the planet because Dirk run off with Rose and Terezi and John's body. But we're also kind of sitting there going, okay, but we've basically said we demand a continuation of the story. We demand some closure. And Hesse kind of shrugged and said, sure, but you're not going to like it. I gave
really
you an ending. You
that.
could just go with the ending and we could be happy. Pretend that everyone had a happy ever after. And as far as you know, that could be true. Or we can continue with the story as it actually is, where everything continues rolling and nothing ever really stops. Because that's just life.
That's how Hussy's always written, though. He just sort of pokes at his fans and is like, no. This isn't a story with a happy ending. This never will be. That's not the point.
There may be something construed as happy, and it may be kind of happy. However, there are always going to be loose ends because, well, as they say, we're not characters. We don't have arcs.
Yeah.
Yep.
We could have more. We could also just say at this point that they continue on with their lives, fighting each other, infighting, or continuing the cycle of the game itself, or just be gods.
Yeah, this is why I personally don't feel like there needs to be more epilogues, because I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet where people demand more. Like, they want to see what happens after, because clearly Dirk left a plot thread for them, so clearly that means that, you know, there's going to be another epilogue. However, I think that, you know, like, I think that that was basically the reaction to Homestuck Act 7, and honestly, you know, during Homestuck Act 7, I wouldn't even conceive of the idea of the epilogues. Like, I wouldn't know that all this would happen. Like, the epilogues, they literally changed my view on one of what was at the time one of my least favorite ships. Like, they literally made me do a 180 on that. So,
Which
you know,
ship?
Dave Cat. Like, I really didn't like how it was handled.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, in Intermission 5, I really didn't like how it was handled. But then the epilogues happened, and I was like, wow, I really like how this is handled. So in hindsight, it corrected a lot of things for me, and honestly, I feel like some people might be feeling like I did at Act 7. There's no, there has to be more. There has to be another point in continuing onward, because maybe they're not satisfied with, what Dirk did or something. And
or
I
John
think,
did.
yeah.
If it is continuation, and I'll say I could go either way. If they want to do more, they can do more. It's going to hurt. It's going to be the same as the epilogue. It's going to feel good, but it's going to hurt.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah,
definitely
they
going
can
to
keep
hurt.
going, but I don't think they'll ever neatly close out the story. That's just not the kind of writing that this is.
Yeah,
I want to say I'll like a reality where we continue on and see what happens with John if they're able to bring him back, albeit not as a narrative important person. That'd be nice. That'd be so nice for him. That poor kid.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Being the bitch in the narrative apparently just drove him down into a hole I did not believe possible. But if we do go that way, we're probably going to have something else we're going to wholly regret, because that's just going to how it's going to come out naturally. We're going to have John come back and go, why didn't you leave me dead or something?
Yeah, this was...
Probably.
Yeah, I feel like the epilogues were, to some degree, necessary for the people who wanted to see more, but also not necessary for the... Like, it's... Again, tales of dubious authenticity. I feel like they kind of just stand alone on their own. I don't feel like there needs to be more, but now, thanks to this discussion, I kind of understand the point of view for people who feel like there needs to be more, but I personally don't, because I feel like at this end, even though Dirk left his plot thread, even after Act 7, there were still plot threads. They got resolved, and that's it. Life carries on, and you can write fan fictions next. That's what I interpreted the last line of the Meat postscript as. And with this, a line was created, and above this line is all that matters, and below it, nothing matters. And I kind of interpreted that as this is the end, and the rest is in your head. So go ahead, have fun.
That is Calliope saying, just ignore all this stuff down here.
Yeah.
And it's also really fun if you read Meat first, because then you're like, Candy is even less canon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that does make sense.
Oh, let's
Funny
not,
how writing works like that.
not a canon thing. Let's not play the Pillars of Canon game. Oh God.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, that's way too complicated, and I don't care.
Yeah, that would add another like 3 hours to this
Love it,
podcast
but
episode.
yes, that'd be going into a long, long haul.
I mean, like
Yeah.
technically, we could just like come back next week and discuss that, but I don't know.
It's not
Don't
worth it.
tempt me.
Either way, I don't know. I just think the epilogues make a satisfactory ending because they're not satisfactory or an ending.
I
Yeah, so
kind
we
of
could
think
have
that
said the same
they.
about the finale.
Yeah, but it's more of it. And it's also 190 words.
Yeah.
190,000 words.
I would say that the epilogues kind of are an ending.
And a new
I'm a writer. I am very well versed in the Blake Snyder, whatever Joseph Campbell, hero with 1,000 faces.
You know,
This is how a story is written. There are no alternatives. But as far as like actually creating an ending, I think it is a little bit absurd to think that Homestuck would end the way that Act 7 did. And the way that the epilogue, I guess, handled and retconned the ending in its own way is kind of how the Joseph Campbell ending is supposed to happen. And I mean, obviously, it could continue, it could not continue. But either way, I do kind of see this as integral to the Homestuck story. If not for the sake of giving your characters, you know, a more realistic view that happy ever after is never going to be a thing in these kinds of stories, then for the sake of creating a satisfying narrative in which the hero does defeat the villain, etc. You know, we get all of the important character moments for your boy John, and he doesn't just end in a sort of fugue state of ennui. Although, you know, he kind of does end in a fugue state of ennui anyways.
At the
It's
very
just that
least,
now he's done it having actually completed what he was meant to do, at least meant in the sake of the narrative, whatever that is decided for him to do.
At the very least, I will say this: as cruel as Meet John's ending was, and I love that boy so much, so it kind of hurt to read Meet. Frankly, everything about John to read. I will say this: they may have, between the two of our narrative forces hurrying to kill him off, they at least gave him an ending that I think is very quintessentially John.
Yeah.
He had a very climactic battle, and then he found the cheesy way to die possible.
When the heir of breath
Would deserve some rest.
dies for good, it won't be as a scoundrel. And it wasn't as
No,
a
I meant
scoundrel.
the part where he had
No,
to
it
choose
wasn't.
the ending where he was admitting to some broad or dame that he loves her.
Oh yeah. I
That is the
just
most John
realized.
ending I can think of.
How do I live without?
God.
I practically hear it quietly in the background.
Yeah, it's appropriate.
I guess he doesn't.
Well, this concludes the 8th episode of the RPGStuck podcast. Until next time, I guess I'll just see y'all later. Say
Yeah.
bye,
For
guys.
the next time we talk about
Bye.
this.
Ciao.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah, honestly, this was one of my favorite topics. Like, this really was one of my favorite topics. So, bye, guys.